Welcome to Karen Universe, where we dive into every wild, quirky, and intriguing story out there. One dinner invite from a Karen boss changed everything she believed about power and trust. She worked in as an employee but walked out as the one who could turn his world upside down. What the girl did next with her boss is something no one, absolutely no one, could have imagined. After that dinner, everything changed in a way that shocked everyone.
They told me this story was too dangerous to tell, but silence is exactly how power survives. On her first morning at the company, she noticed the fear before she noticed the profits, whispers in hallways, eyes dropping when the boss passed, smiles that never reached anyone's face. She was new, divorced, underestimated, and desperate for stability. She didn't know then that one dinner invitation would flip her entire life upside down forever. The company was failing when she joined. Sales were sinking, employees were careless, and leadership was arrogant. But she worked differently. She stayed late, asked hard questions, fixed systems no one else touched. Slowly, numbers rose, clients returned, profits followed, and with success came attention she never asked for. The boss watched her too closely, praised her too loudly, and crossed invisible lines with confident ease. At first, it felt harmless. Compliments, casual jokes, then expectations. Stay late, join private meetings, ignore behavior everyone else pretended not to see. She refused politely, professionally, firmly. That refusal changed everything. The office grew colder. Coworkers warned her without words. Some advised silence. Others avoided her completely. Power, she learned, does not like resistance. Then came the invitation. A dinner at the boss's house. He said his wife would be there. Friends, family, a safe, respectable gathering. Refusing felt risky. Accepting felt worse. But she believed professionalism would protect her. She believed lies dressed as manners. She believed the system would never let him go too far. The house was quiet, too quiet. No laughter, no guests, no wife. Just him, waiting, confident, untouchable. That was the moment everything broke. Not loudly, not instantly, but permanently. She left shaken, terrified, carrying a truth too heavy to speak and too dangerous to hide. The next morning, she still showed up to work. Strength often looks like routine. She documented everything: dates, messages, changes in behavior. The same coworkers who once smiled now avoided her eyes. She realized then this wasn't one man's secret. It was a shared silence. A system designed to protect itself. When she finally went to the police, they barely listened. They knew his name, his donations, his influence. They sent her away with empty sympathy and closed doors. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. Because this wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every silence before her, and every woman after. And this was only the beginning. The days after the police visit were heavier than the night itself. She walked through the city feeling watched, measured, erased. Every step reminded her that truth alone meant nothing without power behind it. At work, the atmosphere had shifted completely. Meetings stopped including her. Emails went unanswered. Projects she built were reassigned without explanation. The boss never spoke to her directly again, yet his presence followed her everywhere. She soon understood why. The servants at the house knew. The driver who opened the gate that night avoided her eyes when she crossed the parking lot. The security guard at the office suddenly changed shifts. The housekeeper, a quiet man who had always nodded politely, now looked away as if guilt itself had weight. Silence, she realized, was organized, coordinated, paid for. At home, she barely slept. Every sound felt like a warning. She replayed the dinner repeatedly, questioning herself, doubting details, fighting the instinct to blame herself. But she forced herself to write. Pages and pages. Dates, names, timelines. She backed up files in multiple places. If something happened to her, the truth would still exist somewhere. When she returned to the police station a second time, the response was colder. They suggested misunderstandings. They hinted at reputation. They asked why she went to the house at all. That was when anger replaced fear. She realized the system wasn't broken. It was functioning exactly as designed. Protect the powerful, exhaust the rest. She decided to push where pressure mattered. Media. She contacted a small local journalist first. Then another. She spoke carefully, avoiding names, focusing on patterns instead of accusations. The story didn't explode overnight, but it started breathing. Online comments appeared. People shared similar experiences. Quiet stories surfaced, whispered but familiar. Inside the company, tension grew. Employees were warned not to speak. Meetings were held behind closed doors. The boss donated publicly to charities. His image polished itself aggressively. Meanwhile, the servants tightened their silence. Cameras in the house were quietly disabled. Hard drives disappeared. But mistakes always happen when arrogance feels invincible. The housekeeper's wife noticed changes first. Locked rooms, late nights, nervous behavior. She was pregnant, newly married, and uncomfortable with the secrecy. One night, while cleaning an old storage room, she found something forgotten. A small camera, still functional, still holding files. She didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew it didn't belong hidden. Meanwhile, public pressure grew slowly but steadily. Talk shows debated power abuse. Social media questioned the company's sudden success. Police superiors began asking quiet questions. The case that was once ignored was now inconveniently visible. The girl understood then. Justice doesn't arrive loudly. It creeps forward when too many people start watching. And the camera was about to change everything. The housekeeper's wife didn't tell anyone at first. Fear makes people careful, and pregnancy made her cautious. She hid the camera inside a cloth bag beneath old winter blankets, pretending it never existed. But guilt has a sound. It keeps you awake. It makes ordinary conversations feel heavy. Each time she looked at her husband, she wondered what kind of man could help hide something so dark. At the company, pressure tightened like a closing fist. The girl was officially placed on temporary leave, framed as concern for her mental health. Colleagues who once relied on her work now avoided her name entirely. She spent her days answering emails from journalists, rejecting threats disguised as advice, and waiting. Waiting was the hardest part. Not knowing when the next blow would come. Then the interviews aired. Not all at once. Not on major channels. But enough. One late-night discussion. One morning radio mention. One trending clip shared by strangers who recognized the pattern even without details. The public didn't know everything, but they knew enough to ask questions. And questions scare people who are used to silence. Police behavior shifted subtly. Calls were returned faster. Statements were reread. A senior officer requested the file. Officially, nothing had changed. Unofficially, the wind had turned. The girl noticed it in tone, in posture, in the sudden politeness she'd been denied before. Inside the boss's house, panic began to show. Servants were questioned privately. Promises were made. Threats followed. The driver was told to remember who paid his salary. The security guard was reminded of favors done in the past. Loyalty was purchased again, urgently this time. But loyalty fractures under weight. The housekeeper's wife watched her husband unravel. He drank more, snapped faster. One night, unable to carry it anymore, she confronted him. He denied everything at first. Then blamed the boss. Then cried. He admitted they were told to erase evidence, to disable cameras, to forget what happened. He swore he never touched the girl, only watched, only obeyed. That confession broke something in her. While he slept, she retrieved the camera. She checked the files. What she saw made her hands shake. The footage was partial, unclear in places, but undeniable in intent. Dates matched. Voices matched. The lie collapsed. She didn't go to the police. Not yet. She went to the media. The clip aired blurred, cautious, legally reviewed. But it was enough. Public reaction exploded. The company's name trended. Sponsors paused. Police headquarters issued statements. Within days, arrests followed. Servants were questioned. Stories conflicted. Truth sharpened. And for the first time since that dinner, the girl felt something new. Hope. The arrest didn't bring peace. It brought noise. Cameras crowded courthouse steps. Commentators argued. Supporters and doubters shouted across screens. The boss appeared briefly, confident even in custody, smiling as if this were a misunderstanding that money would erase. But the smile faded when charges expanded and names multiplied. The story was no longer about one incident. It was about a system. The girl returned to the station for a formal statement, this time escorted by an officer who apologized without saying the word. She spoke calmly, clearly, refusing to dramatize pain. Facts were enough now. Dates aligned, messages verified, footage authenticated. The case file grew heavy, undeniable. Inside the company, chaos replaced order. Executives resigned. Employees deleted posts. Emails surfaced showing pressure, warnings, rewards. The driver confessed first, bargaining for leniency. The security guard followed, claiming fear. The housekeeper broke last, his voice shaking as he confirmed instructions to disable cameras and erase logs. Each confession tightened the net. The housekeeper's wife watched from a distance, her identity protected, her choice irreversible. She moved out quietly, carrying little more than documents and courage. She never spoke publicly. She didn't need to. The truth spoke loudly enough without her face attached. Court proceedings moved faster than expected. Public attention does that. Judges denied delays. Motions failed. The boss's lawyers shifted strategies, from denial to damage control. They questioned motives, credibility, timing. But evidence is stubborn. It waits patiently for lies to exhaust themselves. When the verdict came, it was calm. Almost quiet. Guilty counts read evenly, without drama. Sentences followed, firm and proportional. The boss stared forward, expression empty. Servants were sentenced according to roles. The company was fined, dismantled, restructured. No grand speech. No victory pose. Outside, the girl stood alone for a moment. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She breathed. Reporters asked what she would do next. She said she would rest. She said she would work again. She said silence ends where courage begins. Later that night, she deleted old drafts, backed up files one last time, and turned off her phone. The world would keep arguing. That wasn't her job anymore. Her job was living. This wasn't a miracle. It was a consequence. And consequences change everything. In the days that followed, policies were rewritten, hotlines posted, trainings announced. Some called it reform. Others called it damage control. She called it proof that pressure works. Friends checked in quietly. Strangers sent messages that mattered. Nightmares still came, but weaker. She learned that healing isn't linear, only forward. The story would outlive headlines, but so would she, steady, deliberate, unafraid of being seen. Tomorrow would be ordinary again, and that ordinariness felt like victory earned, not gifted, finally shared with those who dared speak and listen. After the verdict, the city exhaled, but consequences kept moving. Auditors arrived. Contracts froze. Board members testified. The company that once hid behind polished slogans now answered simple questions it couldn't escape. Who knew? Who approved? Who benefited? Each answer opened another door, and behind every door waited paperwork, timelines, and signatures. The girl avoided interviews, yet her name traveled without her. Universities invited panels. Nonprofits asked advice. She declined most, choosing quiet routines instead. Healing required distance. Still, she documented lessons learned, not for attention, but for memory. Power isolates. Silence multiplies harm. Evidence outlives threats. These truths steadied her. Police departments announced internal reviews. Promotions paused. Transfers happened quietly. The officers who dismissed her faced inquiries they couldn't deflect. Accountability rarely arrives with apologies, it arrives with records. That mattered more. A memo changed procedures for complaints involving influential suspects. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. The servants' families felt ripples. Some neighbors blamed them entirely. Others understood pressure. The housekeeper's wife found temporary work and a safer apartment. She named her baby Hope, privately, never on camera. She refused praise, insisting she only chose honesty when lies demanded obedience. Weeks later, the boss requested a statement for appeal. It failed. Evidence stood firm. The judge cited patterns, not emotions. Sentences held. Investors settled. The brand dissolved into footnotes. Power, once loud, became archival. On a gray morning, the girl returned to the building to collect personal items. The lobby felt smaller. The walls remembered nothing. She did. She left a note for the team that remained. Do the work. Protect each other. Write everything down. It was unsigned. She started a new role elsewhere. Modest, transparent, respectful. Her manager asked questions and listened to answers. That mattered. Some days were heavy. Some were light. Progress arrived unevenly, but it arrived. The city moved on. Headlines faded. But quiet changes stayed. People spoke earlier. Cameras stayed on. Invitations were verified. Trust became conditional, not blind. Justice didn't erase pain. It rearranged the future. And futures, once rearranged, refused to return to silence. Later, she met quietly with advocates, sharing process notes, not trauma. They mapped timelines, built checklists, and trained volunteers to recognize pressure tactics early. Employers learned boundaries. Reporters learned restraint. Viewers learned patience. The lesson spread sideways, not loudly. She kept boundaries firm, refused savior labels, and chose steadiness over spectacle. When asked about courage, she answered plainly. Courage is paperwork finished, calls returned, backups made, witnesses protected. Courage is staying when leaving feels easier. Courage is ordinary, repeatable, teachable. That realization made the future feel manageable, not heroic, and that was enough. She walked home under open skies, trusting slow systems, careful people, and the quiet persistence that outlasts fear over time and distance. Months passed, and the case transformed from headline to handbook. Training modules cited it without names. Universities discussed it as a study in institutional failure and recovery. The girl watched from the edges, preferring utility over attention. She volunteered to review policies anonymously, marking weak language, adding steps that forced accountability early. Small edits, she learned, prevent large disasters. At the new company, trust was practiced daily. Meetings ended with summaries. Decisions were logged. Invitations were confirmed in writing. Cameras were tested, not hidden. When a colleague crossed a line verbally, it was addressed immediately, calmly, documented. No drama, no delay. The difference felt radical and simple at once. The police review concluded quietly. A few officers were reassigned. One resigned. A supervisor issued a memo clarifying obligations when power disparities exist. Critics said it wasn't enough. They were right, but it was movement. Movement mattered. The housekeeper's wife adjusted to independence. She joined a support circle, learned budgeting, laughed again. The baby slept through nights. She framed no photos of the past. She kept one document folder labeled, Truth, untouched, just in case. Preparedness felt like peace. The driver accepted a reduced sentence, testified fully, and apologized publicly. The security guard did the same. Accountability, when sincere, changed trajectories. Not forgiveness, responsibility. The difference mattered to the girl. She didn't attend those hearings. She read transcripts instead. Distance preserved strength. One evening, a junior reporter emailed her a draft. It avoided sensationalism, focused on process, cited verified sources, respected privacy. She replied with edits and one line. Accuracy is compassion. The piece ran, steady and fair. Readers stayed. The boss's appeal reached its final denial. A short order. No flourish. The law rarely celebrates. It closes files. Closure arrived not as relief, but as space. Space to plan, to choose, to rest. She took a weekend trip alone. Walked unfamiliar streets. Ate slowly. Wrote nothing. Silence, once threatening, felt earned. She returned refreshed, not healed, but capable. At work, she mentored quietly. She taught interns how to say no, how to follow up, how to save emails twice. She taught managers how to listen without defending. She taught teams how to disagree without punishment. The lessons stuck because they were practical. When asked how systems change, she answered simply, by making the right thing easier than the wrong thing. Change didn't thunder, it accumulated, and accumulation reshapes landscapes. Late one night, she reread her earliest notes. Fear trembled in the margins. She didn't delete them. She added a final line. Keep going. The phrase wasn't inspirational, it was operational. Keep going meant showing up, checking boxes, protecting people, repeating standards until culture followed. She closed the file and backed it up one last time. Then she slept, trusting routines, colleagues, and the quiet math of persistence to carry tomorrow forward, step by deliberate step. Time softened the sharpest edges, but memory stayed precise. Anniversaries arrived without warning. The date of the dinner, the first police visit, the night the footage aired. The girl marked them privately, not with grief, but with inventory. What systems had improved? What still failed? Progress needed measurement to survive good intentions. At her new workplace, a test arrived. A senior client pushed boundaries during a late call, masking pressure as humor. The team paused. Notes were taken. The call ended early. A follow-up email clarified expectations. The client apologized. Work continued. No escalation required. The girl noticed how different it felt when standards existed before harm. Prevention was quieter than justice, but far kinder. Across the city, the old company's building changed tenants. Fresh paint, new signage. People passed without knowing the history. That was fine. Stories don't need monuments, they need mechanisms. She preferred mechanisms. The housekeeper's wife completed training and secured stable work. She testified once more during a procedural review, her voice steady. Afterwards, she declined interviews and went home to her child. Normalcy was her reward. The folder labeled "Truth" stayed sealed. Advocacy groups published a checklist inspired by the case. Confirm invitations, record meetings, preserve logs, separate power from privacy. Employers adopted it quietly. Some resisted. Many complied. Incremental adoption saved time, money, and people. The checklist spread because it worked. A prosecutor reached out, requesting feedback on victim-centered processes. The girl responded with bullet points and deadlines. Compassion needed structure. Structure needed enforcement. The office revised intake protocols and trained staff. Results improved measurably. Data persuaded where emotion stalled. The boss's sentence became routine news. No interviews. No statements. The system moved on. That movement mattered more than any spectacle. Consequences normalized accountability. On a personal level, the girl rebuilt trust selectively. Friendships deepened. Boundaries clarified. She dated carefully, choosing curiosity over charm. When red flags appeared, she left early, kindly, decisively. She had learned that leaving is also a skill. She wrote a short internal guide for teams, anonymized, practical, clear. It circulated without attribution. That anonymity felt right. The work mattered, not the name. One afternoon, she received a message from a stranger. Your checklist stopped something bad today. No details. No thanks requested. She closed the message and breathed. Impact doesn't always announce itself. She understood then that victory wasn't a moment, it was maintenance. Maintenance requires attention, repetition, humility. And humility keeps power honest. As seasons turned, routines stabilized. Meetings stayed documented. Cameras stayed on. Complaints were handled early. The culture didn't become perfect, it became responsive. That difference protected people. She smiled more often now, not because pain vanished, but because effort mattered. The past no longer dictated the future. It informed it. She archived the case notes at last, labeling the folder, closed, lessons active. The phrase felt accurate. Closure didn't mean forgetting, it meant readiness. The world kept moving, so did she. As the case settled into professional memory, the city tested what it had learned. A new scandal surfaced elsewhere, smaller but familiar. Employees hesitated, managers delayed, commentators waited for outrage. This time, processes engaged early. Reports were logged, safeguards activated. The story ended quickly, fairly, without harm. That outcome felt like proof. The girl noticed how often people credit heroes, ignoring systems. She kept advocating for boring tools. Calendars, confirmations, checklists, backups. Boring tools outlast charisma. They protect when attention fades. She taught teams to practice consent in logistics, not slogans. If power asks, write it down. If boundaries matter, schedule them. At home, routines stabilized. Sleep improved. Nightmares loosened their grip. She learned grounding habits. Walking, cooking, breathing slowly. Healing wasn't dramatic, it was maintenance. Friends stopped tiptoeing. Conversations returned to ordinary things. Ordinary felt generous. The housekeeper's wife invited her to coffee. They spoke briefly, respectfully. Gratitude passed without debt. They agreed privacy mattered. The folder stayed sealed. Trust grew because limits were honored. A policy update rolled out citywide, modest but real. Training emphasized documentation, escalation, independence. Funding followed compliance. Metrics tracked outcomes. Results improved. Cynics scoffed. Practitioners nodded. Work continued. She declined a speaking tour, choosing mentorship instead. One intern asked how to be brave. She answered, be prepared. Preparation scales. Courage repeats. You don't need permission to protect people. On the anniversary, she wrote a letter to herself, then archived it. The letter thanked patience, consistency, and witnesses. It promised vigilance without bitterness. The promise felt achievable. Change kept accumulating, invisible until it wasn't. When someone asked why the case mattered, she said, because it taught us to act before damage. That answer traveled quietly. The future didn't sparkle, it functioned. That was enough. She kept choosing structure, clarity, and care. Power met limits. Limits made work safer. At dusk, she walked home, noticing lights, laughter, traffic. Life continued. She carried lessons, not chains. The ground felt steady again. Steadiness isn't passive. It is built, defended, renewed. She smiled, not from victory, but from alignment. What happened changed everything, mostly by changing how things are done. And because they are done better, fewer stories like hers are needed. That thought felt like progress. She kept going, building habits into policy, policy into culture, culture into expectation. Expectations protect quietly. She trusted that work. Tomorrow would ask again, and again. She would answer the same way, with notes, backups, witnesses, and calm. That calm was earned, repeatable, teachable, and shared. It did not erase pain, but it prevented repetition. Prevention saved time, dignity, and futures. She chose prevention every day, patiently, deliberately, together with others who learned. The work continued, steady as breathing, firm as law, kind as listening. That balance was the real win here. The story didn't end with applause or closure speeches. It ended the way real change does, quietly, structurally, without permission. Years later, people would forget names, dates, and headlines, but the systems would remember. And systems remembering is how power stays contained. The girl no longer introduced herself through the past. She was known for consistency, not courage. For clarity, not conflict. In meetings, she asked simple questions that reshaped outcomes. Who decides? Who documents? Who reviews? Questions like these changed rooms. They still do. The city adopted additional safeguards. Independent complaint channels, third-party audits, anonymous reporting backed by real timelines. None of it was perfect. But it was visible, measurable, enforceable. That mattered. Institutions don't need saints. They need rules that work on bad days. The old company's case became a footnote in training decks. A warning without spectacle. New leaders learned from it without reliving it. That was mercy. Justice without humiliation. Accountability without theater. The housekeeper's wife moved again, this time by choice. Her child learned to walk. She kept the folder sealed, trusting that truth doesn't need constant display. Preparedness had become peace. She never regretted choosing honesty. The driver and security guard completed rehabilitation programs and found work far from the old networks. Responsibility redirected their lives. Consequences taught without destroying. That balance mattered. One afternoon, the girl received a message from a junior manager she once mentored. We stopped something early today. Thank you. She replied with one word. Document. The cycle continued. She took no credit publicly. Credit fades. Practice stays. She preferred staying. She preferred systems that didn't need her presence to function. That was success. On a quiet evening, she opened her archived folder one last time. She didn't reread everything. She checked that backups existed, that access was controlled, that dates were intact. Then she closed it, satisfied. Readiness had replaced fear. The world kept producing invitations. Some were safe, some were not. The difference was now visible. Clarity sharpened judgment. Boundaries arrived early. That saved energy for living. She laughed more now. Trusted selectively. Worked honestly. When asked what changed everything, she didn't say the dinner, or the footage, or the verdict. She said, We stopped pretending systems were neutral. Neutrality protects power. Design protects people. That understanding spread. Stories like hers become unnecessary when prevention becomes normal. That was the goal all along. Fewer headlines. More safety. Less bravery required. The end wasn't dramatic. It was effective. And effectiveness, once learned, refuses to disappear.
If you enjoyed the, don't forget to subscribe to Karen Universe, share with your friends and drop your thoughts in the comments.